Hey lady, welcome to the Grit, Growth, Grace podcast. If we haven't met, my name is Anne Marie. I'm wife to James and mom to 4 beautiful kids, plus 1 miscarried baby, from 9 months up to 8 years. My hope is to help other women experience the postpartum period, all the way up to the first year of baby's life, as a time of grit, growth, and grace. This is episode 32. Hi, lady. How are ya? Listen, in episode 25, I talked about how I was preparing for postpartum during the first trimester. And now, a couple months have gone by. I'll be 22 weeks in 2 days from the recording of this. So, solidly in the middle of the second trimester now. And I thought I'd do just an update on what postpartum prep looks like in the second trimester. So, without further ado, and in no particular order, honestly, this isn't prioritized or ranked anyway. It's just like this is what I was thinking about as I was reflecting on what preparation looks like right now. One thing I've done is hired a doula. This is the very first time that I've ever had a doula actually with a birth. And previous to the last birth I had, my son who's almost 18 months, I would have just said, well, James and I do great together. Like, he coaches me super well. I respond super well. I prepare really well. But after Luke's birth, I was realizing it would be really great to have an additional person in the room who's knowledgeable, who can help recognize when the baby is close to coming. Because that was the big problem. Like, ultimately, the crux of the matter last time was that nobody realized the baby was about to come, which is why when he did come, everyone treated it like an emergency. So this time, my hope is that with a doula, there will be more understanding of when he's coming, even if not on the hospital staff's part, even if the doula is the one having to help communicate, somebody else besides my husband and I to recognize, oh, we're getting close. It's time to prepare. So that is one thing that I have done. I signed the contract for that and have already texted back and forth a little bit with just a couple of questions. Like, my prenatal is from Needed, the Needed brand, which in general has really great nutrition, but it does not contain iron because iron interacts with vitamin C, I think. So if your prenatal contains vitamin C, it's good to take an iron supplement separately, but I had not been doing that at all this pregnancy. And so I just started that a couple weeks ago. So I was texting back and forth with her a little bit about that. So number 1, hire a doula. Number 2, I have been prioritizing house projects. So there are a couple of things that my husband and I know need to happen on our house before we can move. And we originally hoped to move this year, 2025. Now we're thinking it looks more realistic for 2026. So there's some adjustments that we'll need to make in our house. 1, in order for it to be able to sell, but 2, also to make space for this new baby in terms of where people are going to sleep. I just bumped the microphone down with my hand as I was talking. So we are talking about, all right, what needs to be done before the baby comes? Because while my husband will have 4 full weeks of leave this time through work, which is a great blessing and a godsend, those are also going to be tired weeks. Those will not be project weeks. So thinking about what needs to happen ahead of time, I have asked him about the countertops and then in the kitchen and painting, and then some trim work that needs to be done in our hallway. So thinking about what house projects would be great to tackle before the baby comes, knowing that after the baby comes for many weeks, maybe even a couple of months, we are just not going to have the extra energy to devote to working on the house. So house projects are something that we are prioritizing at this time. I'm also doing different things to help the big kids prep, big kids being everybody, everybody that's not this baby. So my son who's 3, we are potty training him. That just started this week. And oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Talk about just feeling inept. Like, I don't need to read anything. I don't want to ask anybody we just need to figure it out and get through it. And I know this happens every time, but I don't enjoy it. There's enough going on. 1, pregnancy-wise, energy-wise, being pregnant. 2, homeschooling the kids. 3, working. 4, running the household. And it's like, oh, and now I'm going to train a very little person who is not at all interested in peeing on the potty. So that is happening, but it's something that I'd really like to get taken care of completely before the baby comes. So we're starting well in advance of the due date. And then when I recorded the last episode about first trimester prep, I said that we were doing some pelvic floor therapy for my son who is experiencing bedwetting. And that is actually complete. He is doing great. That made a really big difference for him. Not just the therapy itself, but some of the things that went along with that, suggestions that the therapist had. So that, I would say, is just like really in a good place. I'm very glad that we addressed that. We are scaling up responsibilities for our big kids, dishes, laundry, a couple of other things, but essentially just increasing the level of responsibility that they have far in advance of the baby coming, so that tasks that don't need to be done by me or by James, they can help with. So hiring a doula, getting some house projects figured out, addressing things with the big kids that will need to happen, whether it's potty training or more responsibilities. Oh, working out. Yes. So Nourish Move Love is my very favorite YouTube channel for workouts, and she has trimester recommendations. So like 17 videos for the second trimester, but I'm already done with those now. I've already finished those, which I try to work out for 4 to 5 times a week. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not going to take that many weeks to go through 17 videos. But I have found that I am easily winded. Easily winded these days, more easily than I would like to be. And so I am doing a little bit lower, I don't know if intensity is the right word, but anyhow, I'm doing workouts also now from Pregnancy and Postpartum TV, which is another YouTube channel that has more, I found like more Pilates, not so much the strength training, which is the focus of Nourish Move Love, but more like Pilates focused. So it's so interesting because it's not like, let's lift heavy weights, but it's like, oh my gosh, can I lift my leg up for another donkey kick? So in some form or another, I'm trying to make sure that I'm exercising for between 25 and 35 minutes 4 to 5 times a week. And then when the weather is agreeable, like yesterday it really was, going for a walk. It is 2 miles. There's a pretty easy, like, this is how far it is back loop by my house. It's 2 miles. So I'll do that sometimes. And that yesterday was one of the days that I did that. So working out, because something that I heard in my last pregnancy that I just thought was so, it really impacted me, was that if you are not strength training and not exercising during pregnancy, you will be at your weakest when you are at your heaviest. And so I find that really strong motivation to make sure that I'm moving, not because I'm not going to be flexible, otherwise I'll be plenty flexible, especially with relaxin as the pregnancy goes on, but making sure that I'm stretching appropriately and strength training, really, and then cardio too, like to an extent, but especially with strength training to make sure that I am maintaining and even somewhat growing my muscles. So working out's been really important, and truthfully, like, I've been more tired this pregnancy than I remember, particularly in the second trimester, I would say, than I have been in previous ones. But as far as aches and pains go, I have almost none. I have almost no aches and pains. So that, I think, is really fortunate, and I think that has something to do with probably the quality of the prenatal that I'm taking, but also with the regular exercise. So those things. What else? Oh, I read a book called The Plan. It's by, you could have guessed maybe if you've listened to a lot of episodes with me, the Lazy Genius, Kendra Adachi, and she frames it essentially as a time management book for women by a woman. And I don't love the first couple chapters of the book, honestly, because it's kind of like down with the patriarchy and all time management books are written by men and for men and not with women's cycles and responsibilities and the mental load and all these things in mind. Okay, fair enough. So I don't love the first couple chapters of the book because it seems like it sort of unnecessarily places blame and also doesn't take any responsibility for how hormonal birth control has not helped women in terms of, if you are on hormonal birth control, right, you have a steady state of hormones, so you're not having that cyclical rise and fall of generally being more, for instance, energetic around the time of ovulation, but then being more tired, right before your period starts, and these other things. So hormonal birth control and the sexual revolution in general, but particularly contraception, has not done women any favors in terms of, it has been supposed to make women's bodies more like men. And so there was no recognition of that in the book. And that was one of the things that I thought was kind of a flaw in terms of, well, where do we place the blame for why time management books and strategies don't work for women? So anyhow, but all of that aside, once you get past that into the meat of what she's saying, she does a really great job of helping you to assess where you are in your current season of life. And by season, she really does mean approximately 3 months, right? There are 4 seasons a year, so approximately 3 months. And she offers some really insightful reflection questions to look back at your last season, whether that's 3 months ago or what you were doing at this time a year ago. So it could be last winter, or it could be fall, things that have changed from fall to winter, or it could be from last winter to this winter. How are things going? How would I like things to go? But yeah, I won't do a whole book review here because that's not the point of this episode, but reading the plan has been helpful for me to consider what my top priorities are in the season, recognizing that not everything can be a priority, not even every good thing, or not even when the things are good things, and deciding, okay, with the amount of time and energy that I have, where do I want those things to go? So reading the plan was helpful to me. I do recommend that book as a personal development, but also time management book. Something else I'm doing. So if you recall from, what would it have been? Episode 3 or 4 maybe? No, those are my birth story ones. When did I talk about closing out the postpartum period? Let me see if I can find that. I want to say it was like episode 8 or 9 maybe. I remember the title of it. Oh, episode 12. Okay. It was episode 12, and I talked about closing out that postpartum period as the baby's first year ends, right? Baby's first birthday, that's so great. But I think I said during that episode, like, I just was not feeling really settled as regards to my son's birth, and just feeling like I was still having some struggles or some frustrations processing that. So right around the time that he turned a year, I went back to the counselor that I had seen multiple years ago. I guess starting in 2020, I went to her for a year, and I just said, like, hey, something is just like weird. I expected to be feeling better or more settled about this by now. And so as I was describing to her sort of what the struggles had been with anxiety that I was experiencing, she's like, oh, that is postpartum OCD. And so I said, okay. So she gave me a couple books to read, and I did that for a couple of months. And then at the very beginning of this month, so it's the very end of January as I'm recording this, at the very beginning of this month, I started working with an OCD trained therapist in ERP, which is exposure and response prevention therapy. And OCD, right, stereotypically in the movies is like people who are compulsively washing their hands or checking the stove or like behaviors. But OCD can also be, in particular during the postpartum period, intrusive thoughts. And that just means a thought that is frightening to you, that you don't want, but you have a really hard time getting rid of, so to speak. And you feel like you need to. And so you can have compulsive behaviors in response to intrusive or obsessive thoughts, or you could have compulsive internal responses. So that might be things like trying to argue with with the OCD, with your scary thought. It might be checking, whether that is checking to make sure that what you said makes sense, or checking on your behavior. Did you do the right thing? So it can be not just an outward expression in a physical form, but it can also be a mental response that you have. And so I've been working with an ERP therapist. Exposure means you're exposing yourself to the things that you're afraid of. Response prevention means that when you feel the anxiety around those thoughts, whatever the thoughts are that scare you, when you feel the anxiety, that you prevent the compulsive response. And so if it was, for example, hand washing as the compulsive response that I was tending towards, you would not wash your hands, right? You might even start by just like delaying how long you wash your hands, or washing them for a short amount of time, or washing them for 1 time instead of 6 times, or what have you. But with mental, it's a little bit trickier because essentially you are rewiring the part of your brain that tends to respond in X, Y, or Z compulsive way mentally. So that's what I'm doing right now, essentially exposing myself to the thoughts that I am afraid of and imaginary scenarios, and then preventing the compulsive mental response. So that's what I'm working on with the ERP therapist. And the goal of that really is just to be in the best possible place in this upcoming postpartum period. And I have noticed a difference already in my experience of intrusive thoughts, but I will also say it is not easy, and I would not classify it as fun. So, wouldn't do it for fun, but if postpartum OCD has been a part of your experience in the past, I would definitely say it is absolutely worth it to do the ERP therapy. So, that's part of what I'm doing in the second trimester. I don't honestly know if that will take a couple of more months, if I'll still be doing that in the third trimester or not, but yeah, I've been doing it for a month now, and I have found that I am less frightened by the specific thoughts that have bothered me in the past and able to enter into the therapy sessions more than I was even just a month ago. So all of that, let's see, is there anything else that I've been working on? Let's see. House projects, hiring a doula, working out, prepping the big kids. Oh, to go along with the therapy, I've developed a new hobby. I don't think I told you about this previously, but my best friend has been telling me for a long time, Anne-Marie, you need to have a hobby that is not productive, that you don't win anything, you don't accomplish anything, it's not at all competitive. Because like I would say, well, writing is a hobby of mine. Well, I get paid to write, right? I get paid to edit. But in December, my husband told me he wanted to buy me a bow, as in like shooting a bow, as in archery. And he's been an archer since he was 8 and competed for a long time in that world. And still now, to this day, bow hunts. So he bow hunts for deer and for turkey. And he's been asking me for 10 years, gently asking, like, hey, is this something you'd be interested in? I've always just very studiously and steadfastly said, nah. But for my birthday, which was December 20th, he said, I'd like to buy you a bow. And I said, okay. So I am learning archery, and it's actually been really good. He said, I think this will help you to be very much in the present moment, right? And OCD feeds so strongly off of what if, what could happen, and imaginary scenarios. And he said, I think archery will be really helpful for keeping you in the present moment and staying in the zone without getting distracted by thoughts that scare you. And so that's what I've been doing. Now, granted, the last couple weeks have been super cold, so not so much the last couple weeks, but before that, every single day for between 20 and 30 minutes, I'd go out there with him, which is fun, and just shoot. Not competitively, not to get good, with no particular goal in mind, but just learning something new that takes focus and concentration, but also really helps me be present to what is going on around me. So you may have lots of hobbies, lady, or you may have a hobby that you previously engaged in and you haven't in a while. But I would just put that on your radar, that if you have not been engaging in any kind of hobby that is relaxing or restful to you, maybe you could carve out a couple of minutes to think about how you could incorporate or reincorporate that. The very last thing I'm doing to prepare for postpartum in this second trimester is to get really regular about praying at the same time each day. Not because I think you have to pray at the same time each day, that's not what I mean, but just because I want to be in that habit, and I found that doing it first thing in the morning makes it more likely to happen. And previously it wasn't happening at all, other than, of course, right? Like when I wake up, I say the morning offering and the St. Michael the Archangel prayer before I get out of bed. But I mean like sitting down purposefully, talking to God. And so for the last couple weeks, I guess pretty much since the beginning of the year, though I didn't have it as a resolution per se, I have been opening up the Hallow app every morning and just listening to a reading of the gospel for the day and a 7 or 8 minute reflection, just very brief. But I really want to build that habit of daily formal prayer, something that I'm setting aside time for purposefully before the baby comes, so that even though of course it will have to look different for a time, perhaps maybe it won't be at 7 or 7:30 every day, but every day I will be getting up and getting dressed at some point, and so I can choose to spend 8 or 10 minutes, even just while I'm nursing the baby, but maybe it's while I'm getting dressed or doing something else, or just sitting down, hopefully just sitting down. I can build that into the day. So those are all the things that are happening right now. And of course, it might sound like a lot. It might not. I don't know how it sounds to you. But, the level of energy that those different things require is very different. Like each one has a different level of commitment. So some things will be sort of time limited. Some things aren't even things I'm doing. The house projects I'm not doing. I'm just weighing in on what I think is important to be done, what would really make a difference to me and be meaningful to me. So yeah, I think that's about it for today, Liddy. I hope you were so well, and I will talk to you later. Bye.